Back here in the Next Panel podcast, Graham, Gias, and Matthews here. We're talking Werewolf by Night here today. It's been quite a while since we did our last episode on anything Marvel, and we've had a lot of Marvel stuff going on. We've had She-Hulk just wrap up. We're going to be talking about that soon here on the channel. But in the spirit of Halloween, thought it'd be very cool to be breaking down Werewolf by Night, which we didn't even know was coming officially until like a month ago. Kind of a surprise project, and it was rumored, made official about a month ago at D23, and it definitely delivered a lot of positive reviews surrounding the special. The first Marvel special in the MCU, I believe, at least in this format. We're going to be breaking it down here today. Starting with comicbook.com's Matthew Aguilar. Or Matt, what's going on, man? I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. As we get going here, obviously making your debut here on our Next Panel podcast.
Hey.
Just want to get make it a little bit of a introduction as far as where you come from, what you do, and kind of your familiarity with the Marvel universe, which is obviously very high. As I mean, you're from comicbook.com, no shit. We're just talking a little bit about that in your Marvel fandom and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. I ironically I started out my comic fandom in the school library. And that's
nice.
because my library differed from a lot of other ones, and it had two comics, and it had Adventures of Superman and it had Amazing Spider-Man. And those two, like, they got them in monthly. And so every month it was like me and this other kid, and we would like race like to get there first and get like the newest issue and stuff. And ever since, like, it's been just a part of my life. And I tend to gravitate towards I feel like now they're all getting the love, right? So now I can't call them B-list and C-list characters, but like those tend to be my favorite characters. Before Captain Marvel movies, right? Like Carol Danvers is one of my favorite characters. Spider-Woman, Moon Knight, Huntress on the DC side of things, Green Lantern. Like I like a lot of characters that tend to be not like, hey, Batman and Superman. And now it feels great. They're getting the love, they're getting movies and stuff. So this is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I cover all this over at comicbook.com. I cover our Marvel and DC side, obviously, some of our tabletop gaming. I cover wrestling for us, Law and Order. Like, it kind of
nice.
I'm all over the place. All over the place. So that's me.
That's awesome, man. No, I thought you were the perfect candidate when you answered the call to help me break this down, especially going off what you said earlier before we hit the record button here, just as far as, your interest in Werewolf by Night and some of the smaller side characters, which, like you said, we've been getting a lot of lately with movies and specifically the shows on Disney Plus. We've had so many of the shows, and they're all ranging from good to great, some stronger than others. But I thought this was cool because this was so different than everything else we've gotten so far. So like I said earlier, this was in the works for a while as far as like, I mean, again, I'm definitely on the casual side. Like, I follow all this stuff, I watch all this stuff, I know my fair amount, but not nearly as much as you and some of the other people I have here on. My usual co-host Chris Mueller from Bleach Report as well. He's amazingly well versed in this stuff, and I kind of go along for the ride. So I'm just kind of watching from a casual standpoint. But that being said, like, this wasn't made official until about a month ago, D23. So when you hear this made official, and you're probably hearing the rumors and the rumblings of this being made, what are your thoughts and what was your anticipation level going into it?
Well, so it was teased a while back, and then they never said anything else about it. And for like months. And so then it was kind of like this running thing of like, hey, did you guys like forget that this was a thing you confirmed? I mean, it's kind of a running thing with like DC movies, right? Where like they'll throw out a bunch of movie logos and then like we don't see half of them. So people were like, did this get that treatment? Like, where is this? And it was getting closer and closer to Halloween. So people were like, we thought it was a kind of a Halloween thing, like, where is this? And then for them to kind of unveil it and really so close to time, I mean, I was cutting it pretty close, overall. For that to be so successful and get people so intrigued so quickly, and then for it to then not even just debut, like, it also debuted a new format, right? Because it's a special presentation format. We've never had that before. It's this 1 hour block where you can tell a story that fits within the universe, but that can really do its own thing, because it doesn't have to establish all this stuff in 2 hours. It can kind of just be whatever it wants, and then you can plug that in later, right? So it opens up a lot of options for the MCU overall. But for that to be just so successful, and then for the fact that it's black and white, you don't think about it, but like, that's a lot. Like, there are a lot of people that like see that and don't necessarily like gravitate towards it. Like, it's actually a barrier for some,
Yeah.
just because, I don't know if it just is for me.
Yeah,
It's
no, it
like, oh,
is. Yeah, no,
that's
I
cool.
agree.
It's
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for it to be so successful is amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really cool too that we're only just now getting to this. I mean, obviously the MCU's only been, not only, but it's been around for almost 15 years, 14 years at this point, 15 years next year, which is wild. But only now, I mean, we've had the shows on Disney Plus for the last 2 years, closing in on 2 years with WandaVision in January. But we're starting to get these specials, and it's cool. I think that they're experimenting with different stuff. Like, for example, we got the I Am Groot series, which was like five
Oh, it's
5-minute episodes.
adorable.
You could finish it in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the shows take you an entire day because it could be 9 hours, and She-Hulk was 9 episodes, most of them are 6, so some of them are on the longer side. I think it's cool, going off what you said, that hopefully we can get more of this sort of stuff in the future. What that would be, I guess, is my question for you. What more do you think they can do specials on? And my girlfriend, who's kind of a casual fan at best with this sort of stuff, was wondering, like, do you think they could do, I was going to say a Christmas special, but the thing is, we're getting a Christmas special with the Guardians in 2 months. So I guess that's my answer. They already announced that, obviously, a while ago. But what do you think the future holds as far as this format goes? Because I agree. I thought it was very successful and effective.
Well, I think like this one, where this one really establishes this other side of the MCU that we haven't really had a glimpse into, right?
Yeah.
Like, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness introduces a lot of things and explores, like, you got some monsters in there, you got some creatures and stuff, but it was still kind of part of the whole multiverse thing. Like, it wasn't necessarily grounded in, like, oh, our reality. And here you can really, like, this opens up. It's amazing what they opened up in an hour. I mean, if you look at it, like, we have this whole kind of bloodline that we're looking at, this whole thing of monster hunters, this, all these rituals and traditions, this whole sector of the MCU that no one's been paying attention to because, like, we haven't had a chance to see it. And there's a lot of, like, carpet rollout for other people to come in and start building their own stuff on this. And you can do that for things like, really, for me, there's some rumors out there that, like, one of the next ones they want to do is Nova, who is another favorite character of mine.
Mhm.
That is a character they've been calling for a while. Cosmic is a thing that I think actually would, yes, Guardians is cosmic, but it's still very Guardians. Like, they kind
Yeah.
of keep you can introduce places and people in those movies, but the attention is really, it's going to be hard to build out from a Guardians movie. And so if you want to take a character like that and make a character piece, but introduce all these kind of side characters and fun things, I think if you want to build out the cosmic universe, you could totally do that in a special presentation format. Especially if they do Sam Alexander, which is the one I'm hoping for. I love Richard Rider before I get hit with a bunch of people that love Richard Rider Nova. I love Richard Rider Nova. That's the one I grew up with.
Yep.
However, Sam Alexander's story is just made for movies. Like, it's made for TV. It's made for that kind of format. So I think Cosmic is a perfect way to go. You could build out all these things, and then you get your big movie later on, and
Mhm.
all these characters are established. And just like they did with Elsa Bloodstone, right? We're already starting to see that side of things. I also, anytime you can fit in a Christmas special is good for me. I'm good
No,
with
yeah,
that.
no, I agree.
Bring
I'm
them
glad
all
we're
on.
yeah, I'm glad we're getting that in December, especially with the Guardians too. Being a big Guardians fan. But I thought it was interesting you mentioned Nova too, because like you said, there's been so much talk of that for years now, just dating back for a while, whether it's his own movie or a show or whatever. And even a couple of months ago, I think the big question with a lot of these shows, movies, and stuff that we haven't got made official yet, would this make for a better movie or would this make for a better show? And now there's the question that you can add in this third option, like you just said,
Yeah.
will this make for a good TV special? And do you think it would work? Like, I'm thinking, like, as wrestling fans, I'm thinking like with the takeovers, the NXT stuff and whatever, quarterly, or actually AEW would be a better example, the quarterly pay-per-views. Do you think with Disney Plus and these specials that they would work better as quarterly stuff, or do you think doing more than that would be better, or do you think that would be too much? What are your thoughts on that?
I actually think quarterly's the way to go.
Yep.
Or skewing closer to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like one on the clock every quarter, but
Yeah.
like, less is more. I think, because we are getting so much, not just even Marvel content, we're getting a lot of Disney content in general, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, Star Wars shows are starting to overlap with Marvel shows, and like, there's a lot going on, and that's not even including all the Disney movies and Disney's own IP aside
Mhm.
from, like, those. So we're getting a lot of content, and then to fit in, like, hey, let's do like 6 a year is like, whoa, okay. I need, there is such a thing as like fatigue. And
Yeah.
so I would say, yeah, less is more. And also I think this was so different that it's in a decently crowded season of shows. There's a lot of TV, especially when you start factoring in, House of the Dragon,
Yeah.
Lord of the
The Lord of
Rings.
the
There's
Rings show.
so
Yeah.
much genre TV right now.
Mhm.
And this one still made an impact. And I think it's just because partly it's because it's so different, it's so unique. So if you're gonna do these, I do feel like you have to bring some sort of like unique creative vision. It can't just be a show that was, hey, we don't want to do a full show, but we're gonna make it into a special. So let's just like trim 2 episodes off and make this thing. Like it can't be that. To me, it just becomes another normal part of the gears turning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I would just like if they did. I mean, I thought, like you said, this was very successful, had people talking about it. I almost feel like, especially with so much content, I mean, like you said, not even counting the House of the Dragon stuff and the Lord of the Rings stuff, which drops, I think, over the weekends. I don't follow that stuff, but I hear enough about it where I think it drops on Sundays, right? For both shows?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
always
those are
watch them during the week and like I'm never like on the day anymore.
yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
how I am with like Andor and She-Hulk, which obviously She-Hulk just wrapped up, but it's usually well after the fact. They come out Wednesdays, Thursdays. This came out on a Friday. Just like the OCD and me wished it almost came out after She-Hulk, so we can get more focus on this. So it
right.
wasn't immediately, on to the next She-Hulk episode or the next Andor episode, which is Star Wars. I know that's not Marvel, especially since we don't have anything Marvel related for another. I know I say it's a short window, or a long window, but for Black Panther, which is coming up on November 11th. So
Yeah.
you don't want to drop it so close to Halloween. Yeah, I think dropping it on August 7th was smart because it gives people the replay value of watching it throughout the month of October. Whereas if
Right.
you dropped it on October 28th, it's only 3 or 4 days. People might lose interest after that. So that makes sense. But just talking about the special itself, Werewolf by Night, again, I had very little familiarity with the characters involved here. I know you mentioned in the tweet, the DM that we exchanged a couple days ago, that you love, Bloodstone and some of the characters involved in this. You talked about that earlier. What about this was so strong that you like so much about Werewolf by Night?
Well, it was one of the things. This is a like Werewolf by Night as a concept, like werewolves in general,
Yeah.
right? Can be very hit and miss. Concept. I've always kind of actually just loved that side of things. Like I love the underworld movies. I love all
Mm-hmm.
those things, right? So whenever you're toying with this, varying quality aside on that series, because there's some of those movies that are just not good, but then there's other ones that I love. So, but it's very hard to get right. And so what I thought they did really well here was take the concept, make it more. When they first announced this, I thought, okay, so you can go a couple different ways. You could just make it about this kind of like we've seen in other stories where it's about Jack Russell, kind of his struggle with dealing with this and kind of this tortured existence that he has, and maybe see how he kind of tries to rectify it or whatever, right? You could
Mm-hmm.
do that. And we've seen that a lot. Instead, what they did was they kind of pivoted and they really brought a focus to Elsa Bloodstone. Now, I am a huge Elsa Bloodstone fan in the comics universe. She's a relatively recent addition. Like she was just added in the 2000s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But she's a pretty much like a badass monster hunter, and that's like she's just fun, and she's typically written kind of with a full of like sarcasm and jokes and quippy stuff, but she's like just a badass, right? So but she's a relatively, I'll say like C-list, kind of C-list character. She doesn't pop up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they really wanted to put some attention on her, like they caught my attention because I wasn't like super jazzed when the first announcement was made. And then when this movie is just really a Elsa Bloodstone movie, and then they brought Jack in such a interesting way. Like even when he first, when and props to Gael Garcia Bernal, who's just fantastic in this.
Mm-hmm.
He's so offbeat, and his personality is so kind of quirky. And then they introduced like the man thing stuff. Like they did it in such a unique way that it just made me care about a character that I don't care about in the books.
Mm-hmm.
And then they fleshed out Elsa. Laura Donnelly did a great job again. They fleshed out a character that can be kind of, one-dimensional, if not utilized correctly in the comics, and has been plenty of times. They did a great job there in making her a character, like making her a person and a badass. And there's not really, and I didn't really realize this until later, but like I think it was the executive producer or the showrunner, they were kind of talking about how like they didn't want her to use a gun in this.
Oh, interesting.
They kind of steered away from that. And then I read that and then kind of went back and went, oh yeah, she does it.
Yeah, you don't notice it when you're watching it. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wanted to like establish her as a, like, she can handle herself, doesn't matter what she has. That's cool. And then the guns can come in later if you really want to do that, but she doesn't need it. Yeah. So I just thought they did such a great job in 54 minutes or whatever of establishing two characters and getting across kind of, you know, the torturous existence that he's had. But this is where that MCU humor comes in really handy. They balance that really well. I get on the MCU sometimes for like, I kind of get over the, like, we have to have a quip or a joke every 5 minutes. And here I thought they nailed that balance really well. And so I just thought they brought so much to these two characters, and a lot of people will be introducing these characters for the first time. And I think they just did such a wonderful job introducing them that like it grabbed me. And it didn't matter that I didn't necessarily like wasn't jazzed before. I came away just like so excited to go back into this part of the universe. And that's kind of what it's about, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're wanting more, that was exactly how I came into this with an open mind, not really knowing what to expect. Because like I said, I'm not overly familiar with this part of the MCU universe. And I thought they nailed it, and it left me looking forward to wanting more, especially with Bloodstone, as you mentioned, and her character going forward. Do you think that that Werewolf by Night was partially designed, that part of the intent there was to kind of use this special as a vehicle to either introduce her in other specials, or like, well, what do you see the future holding for her in the MCU going forward, and where you think we might see her pop up next?
So on this special pretty much gets her to a point where like she's pretty close to she's not like quite there all the way, but she's pretty close to the Elsa Bloodstone that we know in the comics, right? She's got, especially when it goes color at the end, right? I mean, the comics always depict her as a redhead. I could care less about about the difference there. I just don't care. But like having the red jacket is cool. You know, and moving forward to a point where she feels confident. She has the Bloodstone. She's, you know, not completely dealt with all of the trauma from her family, because that always plays a part in her stories moving forward. You know, as is witnessed there, she has a very complicated relationship with her lineage and family line, and she has a brother in the books that kind of comes back and forth. So but like there's a lot of interesting stuff there. So I think she's set to be, you can put her in some other project and she's gonna soar if it's the right thing. Everyone kind of looks at like the Midnight Suns as far as like building towards that, right? This group of like, especially unfortunately the whole Blade debacle right now kind of puts, no one knows what the deal for that is. Yeah, part of that, and that movie is in all kinds of conflict. So and you know, Ghost Rider's a part of that, Moon Knight's a part of that. I think honestly the best place for her to show up would be if we ever get this fabled Moon Knight season 2 renewal. I think that would be the best place for her to show up. She could also show up though in Daredevil, because we got Born Again coming. You know, those two characters don't necessarily always run in the same circles, but you could, depends on how far they dip into like monsters and supernatural there. But I think Moon Knight is the much easier and better fit. I think if you get a season 2 of Moon Knight, she fits there. If you start doing more monster stuff, I think Man-Thing got over quite well, to use a wrestling term.
Yeah,
got over quite well. So if you bring him back and you start to do more monster stuff, like if there's an actual movie that is based around that, I think that's also a good fit. So I think she will show up, and probably sooner than later. But I would say it's probably more likely she's going to show up on the TV side before a movie, because I don't, right now with their current slate, I don't see like a movie that like she's just like, you would put a Monster Hunter in right now. I don't see that on the slate, you know.
Yeah, there's just so much coming up in the next couple of years, months, and obviously, just because they've announced the next 5 years worth of movies
I
doesn't
know,
mean they can't
seriously.
add more. Yeah, I just it's ridiculous all the way through phase six. It's wild, and I mean, obviously through phase six, there's a lot of open vacancies where they can add whatever they want in the next couple of years, which makes sense. But you mentioned Moon Knight, and I thought it was interesting too, seeing the interview with, I think it was the director. You can correct me, but it was either the director or someone that mentioned that it was an intentional. They did it on purpose to have Moon Knight not in this show. And I know there was some talk of that with the Midnight Suns and stuff like that. Again, not overly familiar with that, but just from what I've heard, I think there was a connection there that he could have been in it, but they made the conscious decision to not include him, which I think is smart. Just on
Mhm.
my own personal opinion, as far as like, I think it's cool when you have interconnectivity, and a lot of people like that about the MCU. That there's this person from this show is in that show and whatever. Moon Knight was like one of the only things, if not the only thing in recent memory that didn't have characters from other. I mean, there were some elements like they mentioned some stuff from Black Panther and whatever, like the ancestral plane and whatever, but we didn't see any major cameos or returns or whatever. It was kind of like its own thing in a bubble, and I kind of like that about this too. And I thought the decision to not include Moon Knight, not that there was any backlash from people, the fact that he wasn't in there, but I thought the decision to not include him actually worked out for the best. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think you have to, cameos are great. And, just for kind of one-off things, I love that. Like a great example, right, is the Captain America thing in, is it, oh my God, now it's been so long. Okay, is it Thor? Is it Ragnarok? I think when Loki transforms in the cap for that
Oh yeah, that was
brief set of time.
I think it was the second one, wasn't
Was
it? I
it
don't
Dark World?
I
Okay,
think
it
it's
might have
Dark
been Dark
World.
World.
Yeah, I think it's Dark World.
When he turns into that, right, and you get this cap appearance, and like
Mhm.
it's so out of left field, but it's fun. Like I love like that kind of thing
Yeah, that I
is
like. Yeah,
is great to me because it doesn't, it's just a fun thing for the fans, but it doesn't hurt the plot. It doesn't like take your attention away. You
sure.
know that that's a just a one-off. So you're not constantly going like, oh, is he coming back? Is he coming back? Is he going to play a part? Like you're not distracted. And so here, having Moon Knight in here is, and this is okay, so like She-Hulk, I know you're probably going to have a whole She-Hulk discussion, but I think this is a perfect example.
Hmm.
When Daredevil was teased so early at the beginning of the series, in those like things that people knew he was going to show up, but they didn't know when, and talk of Daredevil kept dominating conversation of like, well, why isn't he in this one? So you had people disappointed that he wasn't in the episode. You had other people telling those people to like shut up and just watch the show. You had like all these things about
Yeah.
Daredevil, and it was like, okay, and seeing the whole thing now, I love what they did with him. I would have almost rather like have just been surprised because it would have kept that out of the conversation for the
Hmm.
first 6 episodes. And if you had teased Moon Knight, all the conversation would have been about Moon Knight and how he fits in with this. And you
Yep.
would have distracted from all these original characters that we're meeting for the first time. And so I think it's better. I think it's better that they kept it on an island. Um, Now going forward, yeah, mix and match all you want. They're established for the most part. People care, if the people that are going to care about them are going to care about them.
Yeah.
Moon Knight walking in is fine now if you want to do that. And Moon Knight is established on his own because of his own series. So if you want Elsa or Man Thing or Jack to hop over to Moon Knight for a little bit, it's not going to distract anyone because everyone's established. So I think now there is one thing from your previous question and where we might see Elsa pop up
Hmm.
again. There's this thing of like Deadpool 3, I have no idea where this exists in like continuity,
Yeah, we'll
where this
find out when it
fits,
comes out. No one
right?
knows. Yeah.
But Elsa and Deadpool have a history, and it's one of the most recent books. It was actually Kelly Thompson's Deadpool run.
Hmm.
He's like king of Monster Island,
Oh, okay.
and it's a
Interesting.
really fun series. Like you should definitely read it because it's fantastic.
Hmm.
But Elsa plays a big part in that because she's like softened on monsters over the years, right? And you see that a little bit here, like the way she approaches Man Thing, so she learns things about the monster community, right?
Hmm.
So she's like ends up being like essentially Wade's like right hand person, and then eventually like she's the one that's really putting stuff together, and Wade's just doing the dirty work. But like they have a great relationship, and then they actually even have a romance later on, and there's a lot of fun back and forth between them. That is somewhere that I not knowing what the hell Deadpool is doing, I have no idea if she could pop up there, but that is a possibility down the line. I would love to see that because they're great together.
Yeah, no, that's possible. I know the movie's not coming out for another 2 years, but I mean, 2 years in the MCU just breezes by because we get so much content. It almost goes by so quickly. Like I said earlier, it's crazy to think it's been almost 2 years since we last got WandaVision. So, I mean, yeah, it's wild. I mean, they've waited years to bring back people. I know, obviously, the leader's coming back for the new Captain America movie. It's been, what, 15, 16 years since we last saw him in that movie. So, it's been forever. So if they want to bring back someone within 2-5 years, they definitely can. It's just cool looking at, the Werewolf by Night kind of universe. And you mentioned Man-Thing. That was a surprise, was it not, going into it? And kind of like the hardcore fans that were, I mean, he wasn't expected to be in it. Was he going in?
He wasn't expected to be in it until the first trailer hit. And then they showed like a very brief shot of him. And everyone kind of lost their mind because no one really expected. I mean, you talk about D-list characters, right? Like, and the people that love him, that characters love that character.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it is with like characters that aren't Captain America and Iron Man.
Funny.
And people love them. And so the fact that he showed up, I remember Twitter that day. Like everyone's like lost their minds. And it was, and the fact is too, it was just, he wasn't even, people thought, okay, maybe he'll have a cameo. Like, no, he's like a big part of the
significant role. Yeah,
and he's great, and it was so fun, and he's like terrifying in one spot, but he's like adorable in the other. It was perfect. They did such a great job.
And he did a fantastic job. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next as far as what they incorporate him in next. And I guess kind of going off that as our last question here, where do you think, I mean, we mentioned where we think we might go from here with certain characters, but as far as this universe, and it's wild to think 14 years in now, almost 15 years into the MCU, we're just now kind of getting to this stuff, which admittedly I didn't know existed within the Marvel universe until I saw Werewolf by Night announced and people were talking about it. I didn't know we had kind of like this monster universe, which is fucking cool. Where do you think we go from here as far as like, we got werewolves. Do you think we do more werewolf related stuff, or is it something like vampires, which I know has been referenced in the MCU before kind of lightly? But vampires, this Frankenstein-esque monster. What do you think is next as far as this sort of stuff goes with the MCU?
I think it all hinges on Blade because honestly, vampires is the next logical and kind of major step for that side of the universe. Because I mean, vampires play a pretty decently sized part in the Marvel universe, just like overall. I mean, they've always been around. Like multiple characters have turned into vampires for stretches of time. Like it's a kind of a longer running thing in the Marvel universe. And Blade has always kind of been, a major part of that. But like vampires have, touched the X-Men side of things, Spider-Man, like it's been everywhere. So and also their mythology is so, because they're kind of these long-lived people, you can reach back in time and go like, here's all the things they've affected, and here's all the society. Like you can really do that thing of like, they've been operating under the radar for so long, and you can do so much stuff with them. So like they're the next one, because the movie is kind of in a little bit, it seems like, turmoil. I don't know how that affects other plans. You can still introduce other sides of things and other characters without Blade, but it just seems like, I mean, if you're going to do a Midnight Suns kind of group where you're going to have, and the team has fluctuated over time, so it's included a ton of different people, but like you would think Ghost Rider is someone that needs to kind of come into the mix. Whatever they figure out with Punisher is another side of that coin. The Doctor Strange stuff has already kind of gone into the kind of darker mystical stuff, so that's set. You don't really have to do much there. And you've got your Moon Knights and all that stuff. But yeah, I think vampires is the next big thing to hit, because what is an easy way and a money way to get all these people who were like dealing with the supernatural, including a werewolf, together in a man thing, right? Well,
Yeah.
what's the easiest way to get them together? Oh, to fight a bunch of vampires. And
Yeah.
so it just makes the most sense. So yeah, I think a lot of it depends on Blade, and I wouldn't be surprised if when that movie finally gets made, because I do think it will get made.
Yeah, I think
think
so
they
too.
get
Yeah.
stuff sorted out. um I hope Ali sticks around
Yeah.
for it, and it doesn't take 2 years and then he leaves. But um I think when that finally happens, you'll get some kind of tease, whether it's an appearance or a after credit scene of one of these people,
Hmm.
and move it forward from there. I mean, I was honestly surprised that they stuck the Blade thing in Eternals. I thought
Yeah. No,
that
I
was
thought
a
so too.
big
Yeah.
jump. Yeah. So yeah, I think vampires is the next thing.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that that's been announced now for what 3-4 years officially, and I mean, I know I've been following the same thing as far as like the delays with it and just the mess that's surrounding that. And Werewolf by Night is a relatively new thing. I mean, that's a bit different. That's not a movie. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into the movie stuff, but we still haven't gotten it yet. And I agree. I think we will still see it in due time. It may not be in the next 2 years. It might be soon after that. We'll see, I guess. But I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. So that is a very logical step and something to look forward to if you liked Werewolf by Night. And if you haven't checked it out yet, after us talking about it for half an hour, I would implore you to do so because it was very good, even as someone that's not overly, like I said earlier, well versed in this sort of stuff. I thought it was great, and it kind of gets into the Halloween mood. So, Matt, this was awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate again your insight in all things Marvel, Werewolf by Night, and the like. I thought it was awesome. But as we wind down here, where can the people find you? I know you mentioned it earlier, but as far as your Twitter stuff like that sort of goes, where can people find you and check out your work?
Oh, for sure. And hope I didn't ramble too much.
No,
Sorry
not
about
at all,
that.
man.
But
I love it. I love this sort of stuff. This is fantastic.
So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Matt Aguilar CB. You can typically find me tweeting about everything from Golden Girls pops to wrestling to whatever's going on in comics that week. You can also find me on our show Comic Book Nation. We have a podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have a YouTube page, so you can watch our shows there. And then all my articles are on comicbook.com.
Awesome. Great stuff, man. I'm sure this will not be the last time we speak. I definitely got to get you on again in the future. We have a lot of, thankfully, there's so much coming up in the next couple of months between, Black Panther coming out, Black Adam, that's obviously DC,
Oh
but,
yeah, Black
that's this Friday as we speak right now, and just so much. So I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to speak again, and it very likely could be for that Guardians holiday special if you're excited for it as I am. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, it's going to be so funny. Yeah, man, anytime.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on again. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good.